Christian nationalism is something we've spoken about a lot on the program. Christian nationalism is, very generally speaking, a view where you believe that Christianity should be not only one of many religions that people in their private lives can choose to follow, but directly connected to the law of the land and civil government. Christian nationalism includes the idea that the doctrine of Christianity should be first and foremost and in the forefront of what determines what are our civil laws and civil government. Now, Congresswoman Lauren Boebert from Colorado, who recently just barely won re-election, she recently made some comments about Jesus and Christianity, and it's really the stuff of nightmares. She spoke about the end times and the rapture, and let's look at the clip first, but I want you to just have in mind, and I know I've said this before and people get offended, what is the line between religion and delusional mental illness when it comes to the sorts of stuff she talks about? I don't pretend to know the answer, but let's listen to what she said.
And one thing that I love, just an analogy, maybe it's true, maybe it's not, about the second coming of Jesus.
Yeah, right.
I've heard stories of, people believing that Christians are going to be hiding out in caves and, and just locked down. Maybe it's a lockdown, maybe it's a government lockdown, but they're shut in and they beg for Jesus to come back. He comes back and rescues them. I don't think that that's the way it's going to be. If the Old Testament is a type and a shadow of the New Testament, and you look at the Exodus from Egypt, Pharaoh, he was the one who called for God to get his people. He said, get your people out of here. And I believe if that type and shadow is true for the New Testament, the church, God's people, will be out in such a great force that Satan himself will call for the second coming of Jesus. He would say, I cannot do a thing in this earth with your people here. You come and get them.
Come on.
Wow. Incredibly powerful stuff. Now, I really need you to understand what she's talking about here. This, second coming of Jesus stuff, resurrection, rapture, end times, this is all, there's different flavors. And I know no matter which summary I give, someone will write in and say, David, you're misunderstanding this or that aspect of it. Remember, there's 1,000 versions of this, but it is some combination of, there is going to be some kind of end time event where the Christians that are alive and the resurrected believers are going to rise in the clouds, and here on earth, bad things are going to happen. In some of these versions, all of the Jews die. In some of these versions, 144,000 Jews survive. There's everything under the sun. It's all pretty bonkers, okay, from just an earthly perspective. And it is apparently in some circles not only acceptable, but welcomed to hear elected officials talking in this way. And they use these beliefs to inform what they believe the law should be. For example, the very same place that Lauren Boebert gets the ideas you just heard, she gets her ideas about abortion, which then she uses to say, here's what the law should be, even though we're supposed to have separation of church and state. So comments like these are just completely appalling. And her desire to inject this sort of stuff into civil government is an obvious violation of the separation of church and state. If she got her way, it would lead to an official discrimination and marginalization of non-Christians, of non-religious people altogether. And it is one of the scariest things that is going on right now as a movement within the Republican Party. Yeah, MAGA stuff, it's wacky, it's scary, space lasers, all of it, right? It's crazy. But the Christian nationalism stuff is particularly dangerous. Here's another clip from the same interview. This was the Faith in Action podcast, I guess. Lauren Boebert says God tells her, re-election would be like the prophet Elijah in the Bible defeating the prophets of Baal. This is what God said to her. I don't know if this was like at a cafe, at a bar, or in private prayer.
Loud. Totally. And then this one, it was just the Democrat and myself. He campaigned as a Republican. Right. The media allowed him to do that. They called him a conservative. Right. Just allowed him to define himself as that. It's bizarre. But I won again with 51% of the vote.
Barely.
It just took a lot longer to get there. But, throughout all of this, I was telling you, God was really pressing on my heart the story of Elijah.
Okay, she's saying God spoke to her, okay? I really need everybody to understand. She is saying that a man in the sky, I think they still say he's a man of sorts, or a masculine entity in the sky, spoke to her about specific passages in the context of her reelection.
He said the true God will answer by fire. And those who worshipped Baal, they believed that Baal was the...
Oh, I said Baal. I guess it's Baal.
The true God. And he said, Elijah said, prove it. If Baal is the true God, tell him to answer by fire. And they're calling for him, they're screaming, they're hollering, they're cutting themselves, they're acting a fool. We've seen that like in 2020 riots and stuff. But their God didn't show up. Elijah was mocking them.
Yeah.
Well, maybe cry a little bit louder. Maybe he can't hear you. Maybe he's sleeping. Maybe he's on vacation. I love that so much. And then he went and he said, you know what? I'm going to do you one better. I don't want you to say that this is some kind of fluke, some sort of combustion that just happened. I'm going to drench the altar with fire or with water 3 times.
Fire or water, whichever.
3 times he went and drenched the altar with fire and God with water, and God still showed up by fire. And that's what he was showing you at this election.
Yeah.
He said it may look impossible in the natural, that there will not be a victory. You may hear the voices, you may hear other people, but I am going to show up. And
now, of course, these are always stories that are told with the hindsight of knowing how the election turned up. She barely won, and she could have lost. Would she still be telling the story? Listen, God came to me and he said, your reelection is going to be like when Prophet Elijah defeated the prophets of Baal. Then she loses. Oh, I guess God was wrong. No, but God is never wrong, and blah, 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 blah. This is the sort of stuff, even if they don't say it, that a lot of members of Congress are thinking when they think about how they are legislating. Now, I know many of you will write in and say, but David, it's really not a big deal, because you look at in Italy, everybody's Catholic, all the elected officials are Catholic, and it's just no big deal. It's really important to understand that not all religions are the same. And I know lots of Italian Catholics. I have many Italian Catholic friends. What it means to them to be Catholic is a very different thing than what it means for evangelicals, like I believe she's evangelical, Lauren Boebert, to be evangelical. And the comfort that folks like Boebert have, even despite the separation of church and state that we're supposed to have, saying things like, we need Christian nationalism, we need the church to be guiding government, and all of the things I've covered her saying over recent years. A lot of people with some connection to reality would be embarrassed to be on video saying the things that Lauren Boebert says, not for the religious reasons, but because it would be seen as so inappropriate to come out and say, I believe that my religion, not just religion, but my religion, not anybody else's, not any other religions, should be dictating how government works. You talk to Catholic politicians in Italy who are nominally Catholic and would consider themselves religious in the way that many Europeans do, they would be humiliated to be caught saying things like what Lauren Boebert says. So it's not all the same, and it's a really important thing to understand. This particular brand of Christian nationalism that often comes from born-again Christians and evangelicals, etc., it's not just kind of wacky in terms of the things they say. It is, but it's not only that. It also is extraordinarily dangerous in terms of what it would mean if they got their way. And when you look at what's happening in the Supreme Court and Amy Coney Barrett and others who are on that court, who at least to some degree share a lot of these views, you realize that if things keep going the direction that they've been going, it's not completely out of the question that in some ways the Boebert types could get their way. And that's a horrifying thing to think about.